Okay. Hello, Mark Larson here for the Dreamcatcher podcast. Thanks for joining us. Today, my guest is Grace Williams. How are you doing, Grace?
I'm doing great today, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great too. I mean, it's Friday. The weather looks not quite as nice as where you're at, but it's nice. So Grace, where are you located at?
I am currently at the moment in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb just outside Philadelphia.
Okay. Is that your hometown?
It is not. It's the next town over. I'm from Norristown, Pennsylvania,
Okay.
which is like a
So
mini city outside the city.
okay. I mean, Pennsylvania is where you've kind of been always in your life, or
Yeah, so I literally live around the corner from what used to be the hospital where I was born.
awesome.
It wasn't
That's cool.
intentional to stay that close, but I just find it kind of humorous that I could literally look out my back door and see where that hospital used to be.
I think you must like it pretty well there then.
I do. It's my husband is a West Philly guy through and through. And when he made the step to come out to the suburbs, we knew that we wanted something that had an urban feel because he liked that being able to step out on your porch and see the
Yeah.
neighbors. And we're setting down roots and we're loving it. We are really
Awesome.
um, a diverse community in that we
Okay.
have people from all over the place, and we are there are just a lot of different people in our community, and we love that vibe.
Awesome. That's always nice. I mean, very eclectic and that stuff. So,
Yeah.
so where you're at, what do you do? I mean, what is your calling, your occupation?
My 9 to 5 is in property management. So I
Okay.
started 3 years ago. I started with a company that focuses mostly on industrial property management. And as
Really?
you can
Okay.
imagine, with all the e-commerce, it's a
Oh
big
yeah.
need and it's booming. And we've grown so much in the last 3 years. When I came in, we were managing almost 8 million square feet. And as of the
Whoa.
end of July, we're upwards of 18.6 million. Yeah. So it's been fun to watch the team grow.
Wow. Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, that is amazing growth.
yeah.
I mean, do you run all this then, or is that is it's
So I am the hub that keeps all of the property managers in their paperwork, documentation, communication. For over 20 years, I was a property manager myself, actually, probably
okay?
15 of those 20 years. And so I was looking for something where I didn't have to bring that cell phone home and be on call
Ah, yes,
24/7,
yes,
and also something close to home because my kids were heading toward middle school and I wanted to say yes to after school sports and Girl Scouts and all the things that
yes.
with both my husband and I commuting to the city, we just couldn't do that. And
Yeah.
so when I found this, it was just the perfect fit. It's 10 minutes from home if there's traffic.
Uh
And
huh.
I there's a flexibility I have to occasionally work from home. When I'm finished here, I'm actually going to be taking my laptop and finishing my day at home today. So,
Nice.
yeah, it's been a great fit and just a really good team who, when I needed it over the last 3 years with the death of my mom and my son
Mm.
had a leg injury,
Oh,
they were there and it was family first and it was just a really great fit. It was a great move.
that is great.
Yeah,
So I mean, that's your 9 to 5. What do
that
you do
is
otherwise?
my dream catcher role is the owner of Love Those Vibes.
Hmm.
In 2022, I at a very a really I would say like a really intense but encouraging and exciting part of my personal growth journey.
Uh
I
huh.
had like an epiphany that moms of the world need to know about self-love.
Yes.
And I decided to share that with them in the form of a subscription box, but
Okay.
also to bring them monthly self love tools that are just topical activities, journal
Right.
prompts, affirmations, things like
Hmm.
that they can work through to kind of get started on, or if they're already deep into understanding what self love is, just sort of enhance that self love journey for themselves.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And self love. I mean, we need self love. I mean, I think most people that I talk to, I would say they don't. They tolerate themselves, and maybe at the
Yeah,
and you can't give out what you don't have. And
right.
and why do we get to the point where we don't have self love? In your opinion?
Well, it's interesting so I like to break things down whenever I'm learning something or checking something
Uh
out.
huh.
And when I decided that I wanted to share this, I just started doing some Google searches, like what
Okay.
what does the word mean and things like that. And what I
Right.
found was that the definition's great. It's just regard for one's personal well-being. That was the simplest definition I found.
Okay.
But what was coupled with that were dozens of links with
Really?
words like narcissism, selfish. And it was almost
Wow.
like if you even begin to talk about what self love means, you're immediately bombarded with all of these negative
Mm,
perceptions and
yeah.
perspectives. And
Yep.
at that point, I decided that, like, let's take the ish out of it. Let's just take the self ish. It's not even, it's something I don't talk about on when I'm on social media. It's something I
Right.
don't put in my self love tools. I just like to remove the ish part completely and
Okay.
focus on self. You know, you hear all the time, you can't pour into other people's cups unless you pour into your own. But then
Right.
when you're bombarded with all of those negative perspectives, it's like, well,
Mhm.
how do I do that?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I just decided to, let's remove the self-ish and talk about just doing what you need
Yeah.
personally, physically, mentally, emotionally. Start
Right.
with meeting your basic needs. And for some people, that's as simple as remembering to eat regular meals during the day. Maybe you're
True.
super busy. For
True.
some people, it's as, remembering to get to bed at a reasonable hour so your body gets rest. Or
Yes.
maybe it's really deep healing work. It could be so many different things for different people. And that's where
Okay.
I sort of dive into those topics and help you kind of look at
Okay.
them from a different perspective.
No, that is so important in today's world, and like you say, even just as simple as eating,
Yeah,
it's because it's well, for one thing in today's world where you can be on almost 24/7. It is that you're like, well, I'll do that when I get done with this, and then you move
yeah,
on to the next thing,
right,
and it's like, what did I eat today? Or you grab something, and it's like not the most nutritious thing.
right.
So how long have you been doing this part of what you're doing?
So I started Love Those Vibes officially in January of 2023.
Oh wow,
And
okay,
yeah, so it's not been long. I took 2022 to sort of lay the groundwork and
right,
understand. Also, shortly after I made the decision to start Love Those Vibes, my mom became rather ill, and my family and I kind of tag teamed sharing
yeah,
24/7 care for her. So I put some stuff on the back burner.
sure,
But in 23, I started and just started laying the groundwork, sharing the things that I was learning. And then last fall, we launched with gift subscriptions, which people could purchase for themselves. I had people
sure,
purchase for
right,
themselves
yeah.
or for loved ones, and they got they purchased it and they got 3 boxes: January, February,
Okay.
and March. And
Okay.
then once we got through that initial, we transitioned to quarterly.
Nice. So you surely have help with all this going on.
It's me, and
Yeah.
sometimes I enlist my husband and my kids
Okay,
to help me
that's
pack
awesome.
boxes, or it's things like that. Sometimes it's simply cutting out the little cards that I've printed, things like that. So
I
I
love that.
do, and I do have a team that's like my mom tribe that a lot of times I'll bounce ideas off of, or
Mhm.
questions or thoughts. There are other moms that are in entrepreneurial spirited, and some of them are running their own brick and mortar businesses and give me a lot of
Okay.
really good insight about, how
That
they handle things.
that's worth
So
a
it's
lot.
not a completely sole effort, but the bulk of the footwork is the stuff that I'm doing.
Okay. So when do you sleep?
I am very good about my sleep schedule.
Very good.
I am kind of like a toddler about it.
Okay. I
It's
like that.
taken a hit this year. My middle schoolers are in this phase where they're like, the one's already a teen, one's stepping into a teen in just a
Mm,
matter of weeks. And
okay.
so they want to stay up late. And at first I thought it was like this is just what they want to do because they're getting older. But
Sure.
apparently, literally, this is physically what their body's going through. And
Okay.
they need, like, their body and their hormones are telling them to stay up later.
That's
So
interesting. I did
yeah, I
not know
found it
that.
really interesting. And so then I was like, okay, I got to give them a little grace then. But I have a trouble going to bed when they're awake. Like, that mom in me wants to, like, tuck
Sure.
them in, say
Of course.
goodnight.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
been practice this year to stay with my healthy sleep schedule while letting them have what theirs is kind of needing to be right now. But usually I'm really good about my Sunday through Thursday, faithfully. I go
Uh-huh.
upstairs, wind down. Everybody knows mom and dad's room's quiet before bed. I usually
Yep.
read, sometimes I'll journal and set myself up for a really relaxing night's sleep. And
And
then
that's
on the
good.
weekends, like, I'm not going to lie, I'll stay up on a Friday night and binge some
Okay.
Netflix. But
I could definitely, you got to do that too. So yeah, I definitely, well, and it's kind of a journey. Like most things,
yeah,
you kind of have to work through it to get what works and what doesn't work. So,
right.
so how do people find you? Like for your subscription, how is,
Sure. So I do have a website. It's called lovethosevibes.com.
okay.
And that's where you could read about my story and kind of how I stepped into Love Those Vibes. If you're, a product owner or somebody who has communities and you want to try and collaborate, you can, click on the collab tab and see what that's all about.
Okay.
But where I really spend a lot of my time, where I'm out there sharing self love, is in three ways. One, I'm over on Instagram a lot. I have
Okay.
Love Those Vibes box is there, and I share a lot. Just sometimes it's tips and tools, and sometimes it's just reminders that I'm kind of going through myself. So I'll take a minute and sort of share that with other people because I figure, if it's something I'm going through, somebody else might be experiencing it too.
Right.
And I always find it helpful when people share what they're learning. So I enjoy learning from it. So I try to do the
Yes.
same thing and share there. And then I love doing, I have obviously monthly self love tools that get emailed out to all the subscribers. And I have an email list that I love. I'm not spammy on that. Like, I know I've signed up for emails where I get like at least one a day. And I'm like, I don't have to read them all. So I try
Yes.
to just send a few a month, just again, like this summer, I did like a little series on road trips because my family loves road trips and kind
Awesome. I
of
love that.
likened them to like how life can be like a road trip. So I try not
Oh,
to
yes.
overload you, but
Yeah.
and then in person, like if you are local to the Philadelphia area, I'm trying to be out every month at events. Whether last weekend
Okay.
it was a women's summit, I was a vendor
Perfect.
at, and just so great to get like in person and get that
Yes.
energy from each other and encourage
Yes.
each other.
It is. That's great. And I'm glad to hear with the email because sometimes I sign up and it's like maybe 10 seconds later and I already have it. And it's just, it
Yeah.
continues. And it's like, I just like, oh, this was a mistake, and
Yeah, like as I want to read it. That sounds like a great subject, but
yes.
I'm not going to get to it until next week.
Yeah. No, in today's world, I mean, oh my gosh, so many emails in just a day's time
Yeah.
and it just doesn't work. But no, I think so. Okay. You go to in-person events. Would you ever have an event yourself or have you had an event yourself?
Yeah, so I did an in-person workshop, and I
Okay.
actually invited a friend who is a Reiki practitioner, and we talked about
Awesome.
your energy and self-love. And so I'm planning to do more of those. But I did last weekend, I had a busy weekend last weekend. I also
Okay.
did a workshop in a Facebook group. And the interesting thing is that the Facebook group is an area of like I'm just dabbling and learning. It's
Sure.
all about like toxin-free living for people who are really serious about getting rid of like unhealthy chemicals. And
Yes.
someone who's very special in my life created the group. And I thought, well, like this is a journey that I'm not deep in, but I'm just kind of learning about. Let me join the
Right.
group. It has exploded. You'd be surprised how many people want to learn about that.
I can believe that.
And so,
I would be one too. So I didn't mean to
yeah,
interrupt you.
no,
So,
that's okay. No, that's okay. She had like a week-long summit where people came in and talked about all different areas of toxin-free living. And she asked me to do workshop on self-love during the week. So that was a lot of fun. And I just kind of shared how it's very cost effective because most of
mhm.
what I've learned in self-love, I can go out and learn for free.
Yep.
We're very minimal expense, but also it's toxin free. It literally helps you physically and mentally
Yes.
with your nervous system and literally your lymphatic system. It's really kind of cool how doing things that are good for self-love turns around and helps your brain and your body.
Let's talk about win-win. I mean,
Yeah.
that's definitely a win-win. So, and I love that. And we're exposed to so many toxins, physically. And I mean, what's on, just watch TV. I mean,
Hmm.
I think so many toxins that way. And
Oh
I'm
yeah.
one that my body does not like toxins. I mean, I have so many allergies since I was a kid,
Hmm.
and so I try to stay. Some of the strangest things you wouldn't think were toxic to me, but you can ask my wife. I am a challenge
Oh,
because I'm like, oh, I mean, when I was allergic to, and out of 120, I was allergic to 88.
wow.
Yeah, and I
Wow. That must be
still.
challenging.
Oh, it is. It is very much a challenge. So, so I try to live, as clean as I can. spiritually everything. I try to do
Yeah.
everything. So,
Yeah.
so does do what you do? Does that have anything like with spirituality or anything?
So I am actually interesting. I was raised very, very religious.
Okay,
And it's a process in my life that I've sort of transitioned from being religious to becoming spiritual and understanding what that looks like for my life. So it's an interesting that you asked that question because for a while I was very arm's length at anything that was spiritual because it could possibly feel too religious.
right,
And there was some hurt that needed to heal there before I could really
right,
kind of open the door. But so, yeah, I think that, we are spiritual beings. And I
yes,
just think that anything that you do that is good for your mind and body is good for your soul.
amen.
And so I think it's in the long run, it's all connected. And I will tell you, it going back to my religious days, I remember being taught, like, I think they were called the Beatitudes, and I
Oh
don't even know if
yes,
that's
yes,
the right
I think
if
so.
that's the right passage, but how, like, what, think about the things that are good, beautiful, pure, righteous, right? And
Yes,
that's kind of like affirmations,
true. Yeah, very true.
and
Yeah.
so, and it's funny because I think, growing up, if I would have said to my mom, "Oh, I want to do affirmations," she would have said, "Oh, you don't need that. You have the Bible."
Mhm.
But it's
Yeah.
just interesting that as, looking back, I'm able to kind of look and say, okay, well, there are things that parallel, right? That
Yes.
not all religious things need to be kicked to the curb, but also
Mhm.
spirituality also doesn't have to be sort of dictated by someone else's religious checklist,
Yes.
and so that's kind of
Yes.
the space I'm in right now.
I'm kind of there too, and because people, well, actually, I've had people come and say, "Well, you've turned it into be really religious on your podcast and stuff, and
Mhm.
spiritual." And it's like, I don't know if we're religious, spiritual, yes, but
Right.
and I
And
just
I
told them,
think
go ahead.
too, I think it's hard to separate them.
Yes,
It can be hard depending
yes,
on like what your background is and how you were impacted by religion. I think that can feel, because for me, for the longest time, they felt interconnected, and I really struggled with that.
mhm. Me too. In fact, I never really separated them until probably the last year,
Mhm.
and it's just like, no, I am not really religious, but I'm very spiritual, and
Right.
it is getting well, things are crossing my paths. It's like, okay, this is interesting. I find it very interesting. So,
Yeah.
but so okay, do you do a podcast yourself, or would you want to ever do a podcast?
So
Would
no, and the funny thing is, so back in like March, April,
uh
I
huh.
recorded I recorded with I was a guest on another podcast late April,
Okay.
but in
Uh huh.
March I sort of started having this. I really think I might like to do a podcast, but it was something I wouldn't say out loud to anyone.
Uh huh.
And it's only just in the last, actually, since you and I initially chatted, it's
Okay.
only
Okay.
then that I actually left that conversation and said to my husband, I think I might want to do a podcast. And he was like, well, that's new. And,
Uh huh.
I don't, we have a small house and there's a lot of us living there. I have my husband, myself, and our two kids. And
Mhm.
then his daughter, who's in her early 20s, and her two toddlers live with us.
Oh wow,
So it's
wonderful
a
house.
lot of adventure, and
Yes. Yes.
it's fun, but it's also a lot of noise. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's one of those things that in my mind I was always like, oh, I don't have the setup to do that. But look, I'm sitting outside in a quiet
Yep.
space today. I can find the setup. So yeah, it's something I've considered and I haven't stepped into, because I feel like when I do something, I want to be able to do it well.
Yes.
Not like the usual hiccups of, like, flopping a little because I'm learning. I'm okay with that, but I want to be able to follow through. I don't want to start it and feel like, oh, this was more than
Yes.
I thought it was going to be, and then sort of not continue.
Yeah, and I very much understand that. And not many people stay with a podcast. It's like I think 3% make it to 10 episodes, which surprises
Wow.
me that it's that that statistic. But I look back when I started mine and it's, oh my gosh, has it changed? Just
Yeah.
a little bit. But actually, I do it here in kind of my office here, but we actually have a local library that has set up a place for podcasting. They have, I mean,
Wow.
this library, in fact, I was just there a little bit ago. They have green screen. I mean, it's, I don't want to leave this library.
Yeah, it's cool.
And they didn't even know the equipment they had. It's like, oh, they went high end. They didn't know what they were buying. And it's like, and they said, well, nobody's used it. And it's like, I guess it's been there for 2 years. And
Right.
so they said, tell us what we need. It's like, well, I'll tell you what you need. I'll use this, all the time. And I told him, I said, I feel like I need to pay you because I mean,
Um,
it's really the mixer. And
that's great.
it's like, I would have never guessed a library would have something like that.
Yeah, it
And
makes me stop and wonder if my local library wants to get us set up.
yeah, and they have this library has two 3D printers, and it's just like, wow, this is what I kind of envisioned, I guess, as a library for the 21st century.
Yeah.
But it's just like, so I've been getting people started on podcasts. I'm trying to get my local community for the town and a museum, and we have an opera house that was redone 20 years ago, and it's just like, okay, I'll just keep setting people up
That's super cool.
but it is, it's just, it's a journey. And I was so, when I started my podcast, I had the questions. I was so structured,
Right.
and I have gotten so much not structured.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had where the one gentleman had his 3 kids join,
Oh, I
and
love that.
he's like, well, you can edit that out. I was like, no, I like that. And they were good kids. It was a little noisy, but they were
Yeah.
good kids. But so it's just kind of like everything else that you're kind of learning too. So
Yeah, that's
um,
cool.
but I mean, so would you like to speak on stage with what you're doing?
I haven't thought about speaking on stage, but I just love connecting with people. So for me,
Mm-hmm.
at the moment, my focus is more like smaller, more intimate settings.
I understand that.
Um, just to really, because I think that it's especially for people who, maybe have wounds or scars or trauma and they're not quite sure what this looks like.
Right.
I feel like the smaller spaces give them the ability to, sorry, I thought I silenced my phone before we started. The ability to, to kind of explore that in a smaller. So that's where the workshops come in.
Okay.
And the one thing that I would love to be able to do and is to do like 1 day retreats where you could kind of come for the
Okay.
day and have different experts. And again, that would probably not be huge stages, but also the thought that's recently really been playing in my mind is taking the concept of like a retreat, because I see all these beautiful retreats online and I think,
Yes.
wow, like Greece,
Yes.
Bali,
Yes.
Napa,
Yes.
and it's wonderful. But I thought, how could I make something like that accessible to the everyday person, to the
I hear
people
you.
who maybe can't afford a trip to Greece or
Yep.
don't want to travel across the country. Like my husband doesn't fly. So maybe there's people out there who want to retreat and they don't fly. So
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
why.
I think that sounds really, because I imagine I've never been to your part of the country, and I would think that would be very much. I'm sure well, you have so much history there, so in that area.
Right.
But yeah, I think
Oh,
retreats. I did 2 years ago. I did it an event, a 1 day event.
mhm.
Very very big learning curve. It was so. I was going to have speakers, and it was interesting that they told me what I went through was kind of expect, because I was going to have the speakers and everything, and the
Right.
speakers I had at the beginning were not the same speakers that were at the end. It was, and then it's just like where I had it booked for the event. It was called Impact, and I loved it. The way it turned out was the way it was perfect, but it
Right.
was definitely not what I had envisioned to begin with.
I
Oh
feel
my
like that's
gosh,
cool though when you're willing to, well, maybe sometimes that's frustrating, but I think it's neat
to a
when
point.
you have a vision and then it sort of evolves into something that you're like, wow, that's not at all what I expected, but it still works out.
It was. And Zoom actually worked because I had 2 people from Europe that were speakers, and
Oh,
Zoom
that's
worked
cool.
perfect the whole time.
Right.
It was just the people that showed up. It ended up being really intimate, and it
Mhm.
was. I liked it because I liked kind of that, kind of like, since I like this part, I liked
Right.
having the banter back and forth with the audience. And it's just like, and at that time I had a coach, and she's like, it's exactly the way it was supposed to be. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we'll go with that.
Right. No,
So,
and I think that's true. Like sometimes I think we get the ideas, but we also have no idea what they're really meant to be
yeah,
until they
yes.
start to come to fruition.
Yes, and it was good. But it was. I don't have a lot of hair, but I think I lost quite a bit more when so, but it was good. It was very, very good. And I had so many people along the way that went to help. They just kind of
Yeah.
came out, which was awesome. And that's one thing I have found in this whole arena. People like to collaborate and help each other,
Yeah.
and I love that
It's
part.
I am loving like people I don't even know. When
Mhm.
I think of like when I first introduced Love Those Vibes was back
Right.
in in January. Well, the conversations were in December. Didn't even officially have my business name, but I was so sure
Uh-huh.
that I wanted it that
Sure, yeah.
I used that name when I kind of
Uh-huh.
like connected with the event coordinator.
Yes.
And I sent her like what I called little boxes of love, just mini versions of what would,
That is
what was
so
in
cool. I
store.
love that.
And she is, she's beautiful. She's a coach, obviously. She's a life and a business coach. So immediately when we started talking, she was like, "Oh, you could do so much with this. And if you ever want to help," and even when I loved the concept of her event, and I said to her, "I really, since I heard about your event, I've searched all over, honestly, like the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, because I figure I'm willing to travel a little.
Sure,
And I just
sure.
haven't found anything like this one event she does each year." And I said to her, "I think I'm just going to have to come to California and do it." And she said, "Well, that, and if you want to come a few days early and shadow me, then you can come back to Pennsylvania and create your own."
Oh,
So it's just like
wow.
she didn't even know me, but she was willing to just sort of
That
open the
is
door to her whole process to me.
wow.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
I
that is
may take her
amazing. I
up
love
on
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what part of California? I love California too. I've been
This event was in Fresno.
okay.
So it's like
Actually, yes.
not the most like exotic part of California, but I will say in the lift between the airport, I was able to see snow-capped mountains, which I've never
Yep.
seen before. So it was really exciting for me.
Yeah, and I love California. In fact, that's where my coach was, who is no longer my coach because we kind of outgrew each other. But that's where
Yeah,
her family. It's where she's at, and
right.
her and her husband have a pomegranate and pistachio farm.
Oh,
It's like
that's so
it's
cool.
like oh, I want to come visit you. You're the one that makes all. I mean, I eat pistachios way too much, and it's been very interesting. But I mean that is what I have found too. I mean, the majority of the people have been so open to wanting
Yeah.
to move this forward. So I got to ask. This is Dreamcatcher podcast. What did you want to be when you were growing up? What did you? I mean,
Well, deep
what was your
down, I
dream?
wanted to be a Broadway singer. I grew up
Really? Okay.
singing. I have been a singer my whole life. I haven't been singing the last few years, but I was a voice instructor for 3 years. I loved
Oh,
every minute
nice.
of being able to help somebody else step into their
Yeah.
voice. And Broadway singer was like, that was it when I was a little girl. And to be honest with you, I didn't like, nobody said you can do that. It was more
Really?
like get the job, get the benefits, do the
Yeah.
safe thing. And
Yep.
it's not even like, I don't even think that it's so much that my mom said those words, but lived them so specifically
Yep.
that I kind of, and I watched, I'm the youngest of 8 kids, so I watched my older siblings live that. And it was
Sure.
just like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so the singing was sort of always something I did on the side. And the closest I've ever come is being able to like perform, obviously, in high school plays and things like that,
Right.
but being
Right.
able to sing, I sang with a cover band for a year. And then both of the singers
Awesome.
got pregnant right at the same time. It wasn't fairly convenient.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we kind of fizzled out after that.
So, would you ever want to go back or try singing on stage or
I
singing in
do,
general?
yeah. So one dream that I have is to I one thing is our school district is like a Title I district, which is a lower
Okay.
income school district.
Okay.
And so the music programs, they're doing a great job with them, to be honest with you. But I also think there's so many kids out there who don't have access to what,
Yep.
family members I know have access to just 2 or 3 districts away. I
Yes.
mean, those kids have ballet studios and all kinds of things. And
Wow.
our district couldn't even fathom that. And we do
Yeah.
live in Montgomery County is one of the wealthiest counties in the country. So
Okay.
we are very wealth adjacent, but our district particularly, I think they do a stellar job with what we have to work with. And
Yeah.
I would love to have a space that and my husband loves to cook, so we sort of have this dream of like a cafe that we can open where it has space where students can come and use a piano or
Oh,
plunk out a
wow.
guitar, because
I
those
love
are
that.
things like my mom couldn't always afford to rent that kind of stuff when we were kids. She was a single mom. And I know there's kids out there who would want that and couldn't necessarily,
Wow.
afford it. So the school does great. They have a number of instruments available, but I'd love to have a space where a kid could come and not be told, shh, be quiet, your
Right.
brother's
Right. Right.
sleeping,
Right.
or, turn that down, I'm on a call, where they could have space too. So I would love to just have a sort of a cafe where like creatives can come to collaborate.
I love
And
that.
that's like something that's always been in the back burner, but it's something I haven't until I've stepped into this space. I
Uh-huh.
haven't, like, I kind of stopped entertaining those thoughts because life was
Uh-huh.
so busy. But now that I'm
Yeah,
in this space, I'm like, there's ways to do things and I'm learning
that
how
is
to do
true.
them now.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's a possibility at some point.
I mean, I love that, and I would if you do that, I'm going to come visit.
Okay,
I
that
want to
sounds
see
like a
that. That
plan.
sounds. But so, why do you think we're still in that mindset so much today? That get the benefits, go get the traditional, and it's like, but some people there's so many options anymore, which some people, granted, don't know about the options,
Right.
but people that I talk to still do, but they still want to do the traditional, and I just wonder how we get over that mindset of doing that and doing their dreams someday. And
Sure. I think a couple of things. The first thing is our brains are wired for safety.
yeah,
And even if what we know isn't necessarily what's best for us,
right.
our brains convince us that this is safe because we know it.
Yeah,
So I think that if you can take the time to realize that, like, going from your gut sometimes is scary, but it's
it
actually
is.
sometimes better for you and give your
Yep,
brain a
yep,
break. I
yep.
think that's one step. But I think the other piece of it for me that's been really big is that it doesn't have to be either or. It can be
True. That is
both
true.
and.
Yeah, yeah,
I can be both a 9 to 5 employee and a
yeah.
business owner. And I
Yes.
can thrive in both spaces.
Yeah.
And I do thrive. Like, I enjoy the team that I work with. I looked at my husband and I said, "Do you realize that in 3 years, mind you, the changes I made were changes that were actually technically salary cuts, but because I left the city, there were like no
Okay.
taxes, like
Oh,
tax
yes, yes,
implications
yes.
that saved
Right.
us the money." And I
Yep.
said to him, "Do you realize that in just 3 years of being with this employer, I've exceeded what I probably would have been making had I stayed at my other job?" And he just looked at me
Yep.
like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." So I think that it doesn't have to be either or. And sometimes we feel like
Yep.
I can't do this because I need to do that. And
Yep.
sometimes it's okay. Why don't you make a list of
Yep.
the things that,
Yes.
wouldn't it be nice if I could do this or that? Just make
Yes.
that list and
Yes.
see if there's something on it that maybe you could accomplish in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It
Just
could be
start.
as simple as, like taking a break and connecting with a friend every month, or, taking a class and learning something that I've been
Yes.
curious about. And
Yes.
I think that's for me, that's a big piece of it, is understanding that if I get caught in my stories in my head, my brain will keep me stagnant because it feels safer.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then the other piece of it is really realizing that when I do step out, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be, let's give this a try.
Yes. And that's good wisdom, because that does give you, in case your dream, I mean, you never know how that journey's going to be. That's for sure.
Right.
And gives you a little bit of peace of mind. You can kind of fall back on that, and I think that's
Yeah,
very good, because it is. When you do all or nothing, for one thing, it's scary. I think scarier,
it is.
and
Sure.
and it's just like, just start. Like you say, make a list. I like that really well, and just start a little dream. And I find,
Yeah.
the more I do that, the more addictive it becomes. Traveling is one that is, oh, I mean, I could travel all the time. I would,
Yeah.
I love meeting the people and the education of what the area is actually like the
Yeah.
Northeast, where you're at. I've been pretty much everywhere else in the United States, but very little to almost nothing to that part of the country.
Right. Right.
And it's just like, you need to make that, it's like, we're going to do that, and
Right.
say, this is going to be something we're going to do maybe on that list this year or this month or whatever.
Right.
And
It gives you
so,
something to look forward to. And I think we always need something to look forward to.
yes, yes, I definitely agree on that. I think that was part of with COVID why it was so, because you were stuck in and you didn't have as
Yeah.
well, you didn't know what it was going to, where it was going to turn out, and or how it was going to turn out, I should say. So,
Right. And how many people got super creative and ingenious with their time during that?
yes,
And
yes,
it's like, I mean, if something good came out of it, I would say that's the piece that was good, is that I think it got a lot of people in touch with what they really wanted in life, how they
yeah,
really wanted to
yes,
feel. And it
yep,
got us a little bit more creative and ingenious about doing the things that we talk about all the time.
yes, yeah. You were kind of forced. You had the time because you were at
Yeah.
home and you just had to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's well, there's always positives and negatives pretty much of everything. So,
Right.
but So, Grace, before we end the podcast, what are some other things you might like the audience to know?
Sure. So what I want to tell you is that there's self-love is not selfish.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be, a big undertaking. It can be as simple as, taking some steps to do small things in your life. And it's not just self-care. Self-care is, I would also like to say that self-care is a piece of self-love. But I
Okay.
think a lot of times, especially when it comes to like spa days and fun things for us moms,
Hmm.
self-love can self-care can feel like, oh, I did that, but it's not really. Like those are the sort of the icing on the cake, right? Those
Okay.
little
Hmm.
special treats. But self-love is the deep down. It's sometimes it's doing what you want, right? But sometimes it's really more about doing what you need. And that
Yes,
need could
true.
could be simple as just becoming aware of what you truly want to feel in life and
Yep.
starting to take steps to live in a way that's aligned. I've always thought about alignment like over balance, but I've also
Hmm.
recently heard
Hmm.
somebody say harmony because when you look at sheet music,
Yeah.
there's notes all over the place. And if you don't know where those notes are going, it could
Yeah.
look like chaos. But when they start moving where they're supposed to be, it becomes this beautiful thing. And so I think if you can
Yes.
just look at, self love as a very simple need in your life that can serve your highest and best well-being, and it's not something that has to come along with self-centeredness or selfishness. It literally stands alone, and those things, maybe
Hmm.
they're like
Hmm.
character flaws or things we have to learn and grow through.
True.
I
Yeah,
get
that's true.
that, and
Yeah.
and I think that when you start to truly love yourself, you start to understand and give yourself a little bit of grace for those things that you need to learn.
Yes.
And you also give other people a little grace, like learning, about just regulating my own emotions as a
Hmm.
person helped me understand when my kids are going through a struggle, and
Right. Right.
we always give them the space to talk to us. And what I would always say to them is, you can tell me anything, but I
Yes.
want you to do it in a respectful tone. But sometimes as kids, they don't know what that tone is supposed to feel
That
like
is true. Yeah.
when they're feeling over the top. So it's given me learning to do that for myself, has given me grace to navigate that with other people in relationships, and just even just being gracious about things I see in the world around me, and
Yes.
knowing that, what, I'm only seeing a snippet of that story. I have no idea what's really
Yes.
built up to that
Yeah.
moment for that person.
Right. No, I love that perspective. I think that is very good. I mean, that is, you don't know, well, you don't know what brought that,
Right.
everybody's going through pretty much something, you don't
Right.
know what it brought them to that point. And it's just like people think this, everything I do is easy. And they're thinking it's like, it's just like, it was not easy. And there's days where it's definitely not easy, but you don't
Right.
know the perspective or what went on like the other day with the podcast. You wouldn't want to see me when I was dealing with that, but you do, you give grace because of what people are struggling with.
Yeah,
And
and I think to remember that when it looks easy for someone else, it's probably because they've navigated in the past what you're navigating now, and they've
yep.
learned the tools and the lessons that they had to take out of it, and they put those into
Yes.
practice.
Yes.
And they might be, you might be on chapter 1 of that issue, and they might be
Exactly.
on chapter 28,
Yes.
where they've
And that's
gotten tons of experience. And maybe instead of
huge
looking at
difference.
them and saying, oh, they have it so easy, maybe look at them and say, hey, could you teach me how you
Yes.
got there?
Yes. Yes. Because it is. There's always something to learn on whatever there's just something to learn. And that's one thing also.
Yeah.
People seem to think that they stop learning a lot of times when they get out of school. And it's
Yep.
like, no, that's not the way, especially today's world, as much as
Yeah.
things move so quickly. So, but
And
yeah,
I think I've done my best learning since I became an adult.
me too, by a long ways. For one
Yeah.
thing, I liked learning more. School
Yep.
was great, but I didn't really appreciate what I had the opportunity to gain there.
I think that's
And
the case with a lot of people. I'm the
yeah,
same.
yeah. And now it's just, and there's so many resources to learn from now too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, which a blessing, epic. I mean, overwhelming at times too.
Yeah.
So, but well, Grace, I'm going to end the podcast there. Thank you for being a guest on the Dreamcatcher podcast. Um, and just thank you. And if you
Thank
have a
you for
podcast,
having me.
oh, I appreciate that you took the time to do this. I mean, that just, And if you open that place, I'm going to come visit. You would get
Okay,
your time. I
I
want to
will keep
hear.
you posted.
Okay, that
My
sounds like.
husband is he's on a countdown to retire early from a union job. So if he follows through with that, it might be happening sooner than you
Okay,
realize.
that sounds great. That sounds very good. So, but I will let you go, and we'll keep in touch,
Yes.
and maybe do some collaboration. If there's anything I can ever do to help you, I would definitely be there for you.
Oh, thank you.
So,
Thank you. That sounds wonderful.
well, on that, I will end the podcast. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care.
Thanks. You as well.
Thanks.
Bye.